Claire, a young mother, is wrapping presents late at night while her 8-year-old son, Evan, sleeps upstairs. The house is quiet, except for the faint sound of Christmas carols playing softly on the radio. The warmth of the fireplace casts flickering shadows on the walls, creating an uneasy atmosphere. Claire notices a package sitting by the front door that she doesn't remember bringing in. It's an ornate, beautifully wrapped box tied with a blood-red ribbon. There's no name or address on it, just a single tag that reads, "Open me before midnight." Claire assumes it's from a neighbor or friend but finds it odd. No one in Frost Hollow would be out on such a night. Curious, she carefully opens the box to find an antique snow globe inside. It depicts a quaint, cheerful house that looks unsettlingly familiar. It's her own home. When she shakes the snow globe, the lights in her house flicker violently. The radio static grows louder until it cuts out entirely, replaced by a distorted voice whispering, "They're already here." Startled, Claire glances out the window but sees only the empty, snow-covered street. Then comes the knock, a loud, deliberate bang on the front door. Claire hesitates but approaches, peering through the peephole. A figure in a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat stands motionless, their face obscured by shadows. Before she can ask who they are, the figure places a gloved finger to their lips, signaling silence. Terrified, Claire backs away, but the knocking grows louder and more insistent, echoing through the house. She grabs her phone to call the police, but there's no signal. Her panic deepens as she hears a creaking sound upstairs, footsteps in her son's room. Claire races up the stairs, calling for Evan. When she bursts into his room, the bed is empty. The window is wide open, letting in freezing air and snow. Outside, she sees faint footprints in the snow leading into the dark woods. Claire grabs her coat and flashlight, running out into the night, screaming her son's name, as the shadowy figure from the door watches her from the edge of the woods. Before we dive deeper into this spine-chilling tale, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new nightmare. And if you're brave enough, share this story with someone who loves a good scare. Now, let's step deeper into the darkness of looming nightmare. The screen fades and as Claire stumbles out into the freezing night, clutching a flashlight. Snow falls heavily, muting her frantic calls for Evan. The woods loom ahead like a black wall, eerily silent except for the crunching of her boots in the snow. Claire follows the small footprints leading into the forest, her breath visible in the icy air. The prints look fresh, but something about them seems off. The spacing grows uneven, as if Evan started running or was being dragged. Her flashlight flickers, and she smacks it nervously. As she moves deeper into the woods, Claire notices strange details. Candy canes hanging from tree branches like wind chimes, swaying eerily despite the still air. A small toy soldier standing upright in the snow, its painted eyes staring directly at her. When she bends to examine it, a faint sound of children laughing echoes through the trees. Claire jerks upright, shining her flashlight wildly. There's no one there. The footprints lead Claire to a clearing where she stumbles upon an old, derelict Christmas market. It looks like it hasn't been touched in decades. Rusted booths display crumbling decorations, and snow-covered carousel animals stand frozen mid-gallop. Claire hears soft music, an old Christmas tune playing faintly. She approaches a booth, her breath hitching as she sees a fresh, gingerbread cookie sitting on the counter, steam still rising from it. Her flashlight flickers again, and the music grows louder, distorting unnaturally. Suddenly, a figure darts past her in the corner of her vision, a child-sized shadow. "Evan!" she shouts, chasing after it, but as she rounds a corner, she finds herself face-to-face with an animatronic Santa Claus. Its head jerks to life, and it croaks out a chilling, glitchy laugh. "Ho! Ho! Ho! You shouldn't be here." The laughter grows louder, distorted and overlapping, as Claire backs away in terror. Claire stumbles into another part of the market and stops dead in her tracks. A man and woman stand perfectly still, frozen like statues, their faces twisted in expressions of horror. They're dressed in old-fashioned holiday attire, like something out of a 1950s Christmas card. Claire cautiously approaches, whispering, "Hello?" She reaches out to touch the woman's shoulder, and the figure topples over, shattering like brittle ice. The man's head slowly turns toward Claire, his mouth opening in a silent scream before he, too, crumbles into pieces. Panicked, Claire turns to run, but she hears faint whispers all around her. "Join us, join us." As Claire flees the market, her flashlight dies completely, plunging her into darkness. She fumbles to turn it back on, her breathing ragged. When the light finally flickers back to life, the masked figure from her doorstep is standing a few feet away, blocking her path. The figure tilts its head, holding up the snow globe she found earlier. Inside, Claire sees a tiny version of herself wandering through the same woods. The figure raises a gloved hand and points behind her. Claire spins around and sees the footprints again. Only now, they're leading away from the woods, back toward the town. When she turns back, the figure is gone. Claire stumbles back into Frost Hollow, disoriented and desperate. She bangs on the door of the nearest house, waking an elderly woman named Mrs. Wilkes, who reluctantly lets her inside. As Claire frantically explains what happened, Mrs. Wilkes grows pale. "You shouldn't have gone into the woods," she whispers. "Not on Christmas Eve." She refuses to say more, only muttering cryptic warnings about an old curse and the dangers of breaking the rules. Claire demands answers, but before she can get more, the door creaks open slightly, on its own. Mrs. Wilkes gasps and shoves Claire outside, slamming the door shut. Through the window, Claire sees the old woman pulling the curtains closed and locking every door. Claire is standing alone in the snow, shivering as the distorted laughter from the animatronic Santa echoes faintly in the distance. Claire is at home, frantically pacing in the dimly lit living room. The snow globe sits ominously on the coffee table, and its glass appears to ripple like liquid under the faint glow of the Christmas tree lights. Claire grabs an old photo album from a dusty box in the attic. As she flips through the pages, we see pictures of her grandmother and the town during previous Christmases. One photo catches her eye. It's of a group of smiling children at the Christmas market, taken in the 1970s. Claire's face falls as she notices something chilling. Off to the side of the photo is the masked figure, half hidden behind a booth, its eerie presence ignored by everyone in the picture. The back of the photo is inscribed, 1973. They always come for the firstborn. A sudden creak startles Claire. She looks up and sees her reflection in a mirror on the wall. But there's something wrong. The reflection of the snow globe is different. The house inside is burning, with tiny flames licking at the windows. A voice whispers faintly behind her, "You're running out of time." Claire spins around, but there's no one there. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire heads to the Frost Hollow Public Library. The building is nearly empty, its shelves dusty and the lights dim. She finds Mr. Grayson, the elderly historian, hunched over an old ledger. "Claire, Mr. Grayson, I need your help. My son is missing, and I think it's connected to something unnatural." Grayson stiffens but doesn't look up. Claire places the photo on the desk in front of him. Grayson finally meets her eyes, his expression grave. "You shouldn't have gone into the woods." Claire presses him for answers. He sighs and begins recounting the town's dark past. In the 1800s, Frost Hollow was struck by a devastating blizzard that threatened to wipe out the town. The townsfolk, desperate to survive, made a deal with a mysterious stranger, a figure in a black coat and wide-brimmed hat who appeared out of nowhere. The stranger promised to protect the town from the storm in exchange for a single child every 25 years. The townsfolk agreed, and the storm subsided, but the cost was far greater than they imagined. Grayson shows Claire an ancient ledger containing the names of every child taken over the years. He hesitates before turning to the last entry, Evan Harper. Christmas Eve, 2024. Grayson says, "The caroler has chosen your son. If you want him back, you'll have to face it before midnight." But no one has ever succeeded. Not in 200 years. Claire leaves the library, her mind racing. As she walks down the snowy main street, she notices people staring at her through curtained windows. A man hurriedly locks his door as she passes. She confronts a nervous shopkeeper, Tom, who reluctantly admits that the townsfolk know about the curse but refuse to interfere. Tom also says, We've all lost someone to it. But fighting back only makes it worse. The caroler doesn't just take. It punishes. The last time someone tried to stop it, the entire family disappeared. Not just the child. All of them. Claire then responds, "So you all just let it happen?" Tom replies, "We don't have a choice." Before Claire can respond, the bell above the shop door jingles. She turns to see a customer entering, but when she looks back, Tom is gone, retreating into the back room. Claire returns home, visibly shaken but resolute. She spreads out everything she's learned on the coffee table, the photo, the ledger, and notes she scribbled. The pieces don't quite fit together yet, but one thing is clear. The caroler is playing a twisted game, and she has no choice but to play along. The camera pans to the snow globe on the table. Inside, the tiny version of her house is now surrounded by shadowy figures. As the clock strikes noon, the globe begins to hum, emitting a faint glow. Claire whispers to herself, "If it wants me to play, I'll play." Claire tightens her scarf and steps outside into the storm, clutching her flashlight. Snow falls heavily, and the faint trail of footprints leads away from her house, winding through the town's empty streets. The storm is eerily quiet, save for the crunch of her boots and her labored breaths. Suddenly, she hears the faint sound of bells jingling, almost playful, coming from behind her. She stops, turning around. There's nothing but darkness. Claire says to herself, "It's just the wind. Keep moving." As she follows the trail, the footprints abruptly stop in front of the old Frost Hollow train station, an abandoned building rumored to be haunted. The windows are shattered, and rusted icicles hang from the roof. Above the door hangs a decaying sign, "Tickets to anywhere." The storm grows harsher, almost as if the station itself is drawing it in. Claire hesitates, fear creeping into her chest. Then, she hears it, a child's faint cry. It's Evan. Claire calls, "Evan? Evan, is that you?" The cry grows louder, coming from within the station. Gritting her teeth, Claire pushes the heavy door open. Inside, the train station is a decayed shell of its former self. Graffiti covers the walls, and broken benches lie scattered. The sound of dripping water echoes through the space. Claire scans the room with her flashlight, her beam landing on the footprints. They continue across the dusty floor, leading toward a back hallway. Claire whispers, "Evan, hold on, I'm coming." As she walks, her flashlight flickers, and the air grows colder. She notices something hanging on the walls, Polaroid photographs, pinned haphazardly. The images are chilling. Children standing stiffly in various locations around the station, their faces frozen in fear. Claire's hand shakes as her flashlight lands on a photo of Evan, his tear-streaked face staring back at her. Beneath the photo is a date, December 24th, 2024. Claire whispers no, 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 no. The sound of a deep hum interrupts her panic. She turns, her flashlight sweeping the room, and sees a tall, thin figure emerge from the shadows. Its face is obscured by a cracked, porcelain mask painted to resemble a smiling caroler. The creature drags a rusted bell behind it, the sound echoing like a death knell. It moves unnaturally, its limbs jerking like a marionette. Claire dives behind an overturned bench, her breathing ragged. The caroler stops in front of the photos, inspecting them as if admiring its collection. Then, it tilts its head, as though sniffing the air. The caroler's voice is low and distorted. Another player has entered the game. Claire covers her mouth, trying to stifle her breathing. Suddenly, the caroler slams its bell onto the ground, and the sound reverberates through the station. Claire's flashlight goes out. Claire, muttering, come on, not now." In the pitch black, the sound of footsteps grows louder, heading toward her hiding spot. Claire frantically feels along the floor, searching for anything she can use. Her hand lands on a shard of glass. The caroler stops directly in front of the bench, its bell inches away from her foot. It leans down, its mask just barely visible in the darkness. In a desperate move, Claire slashes at its legs with the shard of glass. The caroler lets out a guttural scream and stumbles backward, its bell ringing wildly. Claire bolts, sprinting toward the back hallway. Claire runs down a narrow staircase, emerging into the basement of the station. The space is damp, with puddles of water reflecting strange, glowing symbols etched into the walls. On a small altar, she sees a glass jar containing a lock of Evan's hair. A candle burns beside it, its flame unnaturally steady despite the cold air. Claire, to herself, Evan, I'm so close. She grabs the jar, but as soon as she does, the symbols on the walls flare to life, and the air fills with the sound of children crying. A voice booms, deep and resonant. You cannot take what is already mine. The ground beneath her starts to crack, and black, tar-like tendrils snake out, reaching for her. Claire scrambles backward, clutching the jar. The caroler's voice echoes from the top of the stairs. Do you see now? You cannot win. Desperate, Claire throws the jar to the ground, shattering it. The tendrils recoil, and the glowing symbols flicker. She takes the opportunity to run back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind her. Claire stumbles out of the train station, her chest heaving. The storm outside has worsened, the wind howling like a banshee. The footprints in the snow reappear, glowing faintly, leading her toward the woods. Claire whispers this isn't over. I'll find you, Evan. Claire disappears into the storm, the sound of the caroler's bell ringing faintly in the distance. Claire stumbles back into her home, the door slamming shut behind her. Her breath is labored as the weight of the night's events presses down on her. The storm outside howls, but inside, it's eerily silent, like a void where nothing can escape or be heard. She drops the jar with Evan's hair onto the coffee table and stares at the fragmented pieces. Desperation is written across her face as she replays the events in the train station. She feels the weight of the caroler's curse creeping closer. The snow globe rests ominously on the table, but now, something is different. It seems alive. The tiny house inside has shifted. The figure of Claire, as seen in the globe, is no longer alone. It's as if the figures inside have been watching her, waiting. A sudden, sharp knock at the door jolts Claire from her trance. She flinches. Who could be at the door at this hour? A cold, icy chill fills the air, making her shiver involuntarily. She opens the door cautiously, only to find no one. But there, on the doorstep, lies a package, wrapped in the same blood-red ribbon as before. Her heart races. Claire hesitates but picks it up, her hands trembling. The label on it reads, "For the puppet's play." Inside the package is a delicate wooden puppet. It is intricately carved, dressed in vintage holiday clothing. Its eyes are hollow, dark, and lifeless. Claire stares at it, her skin crawling. Then, in a low whisper, she hears a voice from behind her, faint but unmistakable. "Welcome to the game, Claire." She spins around, nothing. The voice is gone. In a panic, Claire drives to the Frost Hollow Public Library, hoping to uncover more about the curse. She seeks Mr. Grayson again, but when she enters, she finds the place eerily empty. A silence hangs thick in the air, oppressive. She spots something unusual, a dusty ledger, half open on a table. She flips it open, her fingers tracing the pages as she schemes through names and dates. Then she sees it. The name, Evan Harper, is written in an unfamiliar ink, accompanied by a chilling note. The puppeteer must have the firstborn. He'll be its marionette. You'll have to face him, but it's too late to save him. A voice from behind makes her freeze. "You shouldn't have come." Mr. Grayson appears, but he looks different, pale, his eyes wild and tired. He's no longer the calm historian she spoke to earlier. His hands tremble as he reaches for the ledger. The puppeteer, it controls the game. It controls fate. Claire's heart pounds in her chest. She demands to know more, but Grayson recoils, as if the truth itself is too dangerous to speak. The curse was never meant to be broken. It's alive, Claire. The puppeteer isn't a man. It's the spirit that manipulates everything in this town, controlling lives like marionettes on strings. The pieces begin to fall into place for Claire, but just as the gravity of his words sinks in, a loud crash comes from the back of the library. Bookshelves fall, and shadows seem to flicker at the edges of her vision. The door slams shut, locking Claire inside. A voice, distorted and filled with malice, fills the room. I see you, Claire. You cannot escape the game.
Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new nightmare. And if you're brave enough, share this story with someone who loves a good scare. Now, let's step deeper into the darkness of looming nightmare. Claire runs through the dark library, her flashlight flickering erratically. The air grows colder, the shadows more oppressive. The sound of puppets creaking echoes, but they aren't toys anymore, they're real, sinister creatures, moving within the darkness. She stumbles across the threshold into an old, forgotten section of the library. Books, now charred and brittle, litter the ground. She reaches for the nearest shelf, but a chill runs down her spine as something moves in the corner of her eye. The wooden puppet she received earlier is now standing on a shelf. Its eyes glow faintly in the darkness. Claire can hear the faint scraping sound of strings being pulled, distant and hollow. "Play with us, Claire." She turns around quickly, only to see the twisted, contorted figure of the puppeteer, a shadowy, tall creature, wearing a mask similar to the one in the snow globe. It moves with unnatural jerks, its limbs snapping and cracking as it approaches her. The puppet strings stretch out, wrapping around Claire's limbs, tightening, forcing her into a slow, agonizing dance. Her heart races as she tries to break free, but her body is no longer her own. "No, I won't be your puppet." With all her strength, Claire fights against the strings. She grabs a fallen book and hurls it at the figure. The puppeteer staggers back, its mask cracking, revealing a grotesque, twisted face, its eyes vacant, devoid of humanity. It lets out an inhuman shriek. Suddenly, the strings snap. Claire stumbles backward, gasping for air. The puppeteer lets out a deep, throaty laugh, its voice booming through the library. "You think you can win? This is only the beginning, Claire. The game will continue until your last breath." The library begins to crumble around Claire, the walls groaning as if they're alive. The puppeteer's laughter echoes louder, reverberating through the corridors. Claire sprints toward the exit, but the building itself seems to shift, trapping her in an endless maze. As she reaches the door, a shadowy hand grabs her wrist. She turns around to find herself face to face with Evan's eyes, vacant, like those of a puppet. He speaks in a hollow, monotone voice. "I'm not your Evan anymore, Mother. The puppeteer controls me now." Claire's heart breaks, but she knows she can't save him unless she defeats the puppeteer. She yanks herself free and runs into the night, Evan's hollow voice following her like an echo. Claire is running through the streets of Frost Hollow, her breath coming in ragged gasps as snow falls relentlessly around her. The town seems to be alive, its streets, twisted, warped, as if something unnatural is pulling at the fabric of reality itself. Her mind races, trying to find a way to break the curse that has ensnared her son Evan and the entire town. The puppeteer's laughter echoes in her head, relentlessly mocking her. She can hear Evan's voice faintly through the fog, calling out for her, but it's distorted, echoing through the strings that the puppeteer controls. "It's too late, Claire. You'll never escape." Claire's pulse quickens as she rounds the corner to the old church at the edge of town. The building seems out of place, ancient, yet strangely untouched by the passing of time. Its towering steeple looms over her, casting a long shadow across the snow. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of incense and decay. The pews are rotting, the walls marked with strange symbols, runes that seem to pulse with an energy she can't comprehend. In the center of the church stands an altar, atop which lies an ancient, weathered book. Its pages are yellowed and brittle, but Claire can see the words etched in a language she doesn't understand. Her heart races. She senses that this book holds the key to breaking the curse, but it feels like a trap. A subtle pressure in the air tells her the puppeteer knows she's here. "You're close, Claire. So close to the end." As she hesitates, she hears a sound, a soft, muffled, scraping noise. She whips around, expecting to see the shadow of the puppeteer. Instead, she sees the figure of Evan, his face obscured by darkness, standing in the doorway of the church. "I'm sorry, Mother," Evan whispers, his voice distant and hollow. "I've already made my choice. The puppeteer is my master now." Claire's heart breaks, but she refuses to let him go. She steps toward him, trying to reach her son, but as she does, she feels the cold grip of invisible strings pulling her back, tightening around her chest, constricting her airways. Claire knows she must act fast or risk losing Evan forever. She grabs the ancient book, feeling its weight pull at her soul. She flips through its pages, searching desperately for any mention of the puppeteer or the curse that binds her son. The words on the pages seem to swim before her eyes, as if alive. She stops at a page that seems to burn into her mind. The ritual to break the curse requires a sacrificing a life bound to the curse, a life that's been manipulated by the puppeteer's string. Claire shudders. The price is Steve's son, Evan, or herself. Only one can be freed, and the other will become another marionette in the puppeteer's cruel game. Choose, Claire, the puppeteer's voice hisses in her ear. If you try to escape, I will take both of you. Your son will be mine forever. Claire falls to her knees, tears streaking down her face. She can feel the cold strings tightening, pulling her into a trance-like state. The puppeteer is closer now, its presence suffocating, looming over her like a dark, monstrous shadow. But as the strings tighten, something shifts within Claire. She realizes that the true power of the puppeteer isn't in its control over the cursed town, it's in the fear it instills, the fear that causes its victims to relinquish their will. She whispers the incantation from the book, but it's not enough. The puppeteer is stronger than she anticipated. The air crackles with dark energy, and the altar begins to glow, casting a sickly green light over the church. The puppeteer manifests. The puppeteer's form looms in front of Claire, its limbs stretching and snapping unnaturally, its mask distorting into a grotesque mockery of a human face. It is taller now, almost towering over her. Strings crisscross around the room, ready to bind her completely. But Claire, consumed by desperation and rage, stands her ground. You cannot break free of me, Claire, the puppeteer hisses, its voice filled with malice. You are mine. The curse is my will. Claire closes her eyes, focusing on the image of her son, Evan, in her mind remembering the boy he used to be before the curse took him. She refuses to accept that this is the end. She will not give in. With one final guttural cry, Claire pulls the strings from her body, releasing the tension that has held her in place. The puppeteer screeches as the strings snap, but just before she can finish the incantation, Evan's voice echoes in her mind. Mother, I don't want this. Please, I'm sorry. The curse is stronger than ever, and the puppeteer's wrath grows more intense. Claire knows she must make the ultimate choice. As she begins to chant the final verse from the book, the puppeteer lunges at her with its long, jagged fingers, but Claire is ready. I release you, she screams, her voice echoing with power. The altar cracks open, releasing a burst of light so bright that it blinds her. The puppeteer shrieks, its form distorting, warping into something unrecognizable. It is torn apart by the force of the magic Claire has unleashed. But the cost is heavy. The church falls silent. The storm outside dies down, and the town of Frost Hollow feels eerily still. Claire stumbles to her feet, gasping for air. The strings are gone, and the puppeteer's presence has vanished. But the price of the curse-breaking ritual is evident. Evan lies at her feet, still unconscious, but his body is no longer a marionette. His eyes slowly flutter open, and he whispers, Mother, I'm free. Claire pulls him into her arms, relieved but still haunted by the knowledge of what they've both just endured. As she looks around the church, she notices something: a single puppet, sitting on the altar, its eyes fixed on her. The game isn't truly over. The town of Frost Hollow appears peaceful, the snow gently falling on the streets. The distant chimes of the church bell ring out, and for a brief moment, it feels like everything has returned to normal. Claire stands in front of the old church, holding Evan close, her heart heavy but relieved. The curse is broken. The puppeteer is gone. We're free, Claire whispers, her voice hoarse from everything they've endured. She glances down at Evan, his eyes clear, no longer tainted by the curse's influence. He smiles weakly, his hand clutching hers. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. Evan trails off, his voice filled with guilt and sorrow. Claire shakes her head. It wasn't you, Evan. It was never you. But as they walk away from the church, an unsettling feeling begins to settle in Claire's chest. It feels too quiet, too still. She glances over her shoulder, but the church is empty, the door closed as if it had never been opened. As they turn to walk down the snow-covered streets, Claire notices something out of the corner of her eye. The streets are empty, too empty. There are no signs of life, no Christmas decorations. The town, which should be filled with holiday cheer, is dead, as though time itself has frozen. They make their way toward the town square, where the Christmas tree should be lit up in all its glory. But instead, there's a dark, eerie glow emanating from the center of the square. As they approach, Claire's heart begins to race, the unsettling feeling growing stronger. The square is filled with the same symbols and runes from the church. A tall, crooked tree stands at the center, its branches adorned with strange, twisted ornaments. At the foot of the tree is a large, weathered puppet, one that Claire recognizes from the church. Suddenly, the wind picks up, and the sound of faint, ghostly laughter drifts on the air. Claire turns, her eyes widening in disbelief. Standing at the edge of the square, in the shadows, is a figure she thought was gone, the puppeteer. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you, Claire?" The puppeteer's voice is twisted, echoing with malevolent glee. It steps forward, its limbs creaking and groaning, as if they were wooden. Claire takes a step back, her body trembling. "No, you can't be here." "Oh, but I am," the puppeteer says, its twisted face smiling. "You broke the curse, but not the power. The town is mine, Claire. It always has been. And now you will join me. Forever." Evan, standing beside Claire, suddenly gasps. His body stiffens, his eyes glazing over as the curse takes hold of him once more. Claire reaches out to him, but before she can grab him, Evan collapses to the ground, his limbs jerking unnaturally. The puppeteer laughs again, louder this time. "Your son is mine once again. And now you will join him in my puppet show." Claire's heart pounds in her chest. The puppeteer is back, stronger than before, and Evan is lost once again. Claire looks around, desperate for any way to fight back. The town square seems to warp, as if it is bending under the puppeteer's control. The Christmas tree flickers with an unnatural light, and the puppets, so many puppets, begin to emerge from the shadows, their lifeless eyes fixed on her. Claire feels the familiar tug of the strings pulling at her again. But this time, she's not going to succumb. She won't let Evan become another puppet. With a roar of defiance, Claire pulls herself free from the strings, even as the puppeteer's shadow grows larger, its presence suffocating. She runs toward Evan, her voice breaking as she calls his name. "Evan, you have to fight. Fight it." For a moment, it seems like he doesn't hear her. His body jerks, his fingers twitching as if controlled by an unseen hand. But then, slowly, his eyes clear. There's a brief moment of recognition, and then Evan speaks, his voice weak but filled with determination. I don't want to be a puppet anymore, Mom." With one final effort, Claire grabs the puppet in the center of the square, the one that had haunted her since the church. She holds it tight, feeling its lifeless form squirm in her hands. It's the key to ending the puppeteer's control once and for all. But the puppeteer won't let go easily. As the figure steps toward her, its limbs extending like a spider's legs, Claire throws the puppet into the fire that is suddenly ignited in the center of the square. The flames roar to life, and for a moment, everything is silent. The puppeteer screams as the puppet burns, its form disintegrating, its power fading. The town of Frost Hollow begins to shift, the dark influence of the puppeteer lifting. The eerie glow fades, and the symbols on the ground disappear. As the last vestiges of the curse lift, Claire and Evan stand in the square, watching the flames slowly die down. The puppeteer is gone, its presence erased from the town. But the price of their freedom is not without consequence. Evan looks up at Claire, his face pale and exhausted. "It's over, isn't it?" he asks, his voice trembling. Claire nods, but there's a sadness in her eyes. She knows that the scars left by the curse will never truly fade. Frost Hollow may be free, but the memories of what happened here will linger forever. As the first light of Christmas morning breaks through the clouds, Claire takes Evan's hand, leading him away from the square. The town is still eerily silent, but there's a sense of peace now, a sense that the nightmare has ended. But as they walk away, Claire looks back one last time. From the shadows, she sees a figure faint, barely visible standing at the edge of the square. The puppeteer's smile flickers, almost imperceptible, and in that moment, Claire knows that the curse may have been broken, but the puppeteer's influence will never truly be gone.